Greetings and welcome. We are at Senior English B, and our objective for the hour now is to work with two offerings by Stevie Smith. I'm with you on page 1288 now. We'll be looking at Her Frog Prince as well as Not Waving But Drowning. Let's point out for your notes just now originally that Stevie Smith's poems are a part of what we will call the modern and even postmodern era. That is to say, if you look at her dates on the previous page, you can kind of see here some intel. She will pass away in 1971. Notice this span of her years, 1902 to 1971. Think about all of the things she sees in her lifetime that constitute really 2/3 of the 20th century. And she kind of has a brilliant ability to encapsulate all of that into poems that are going to be at the same time very accessible but also very difficult. By accessible, I mean easy. By difficult, I mean not easy. Her poetry has this kind of magic quality about it in that regards. Let me give you an example. Look at the poem, The Frog Prince, with me, and right away, one or two of you will say, yes, finally, as high school seniors, we finally get to read a poem that actually speaks directly to our experience of being high school seniors. Let's take a look at it and see if we can make any 3A and 3B relational observations. I am a frog. Are you reading it with me now? The Frog Prince, 1288. I am a frog. I live under a spell. I live at the bottom of a green well. And here I must wait until a maiden places me on her royal pillow and kisses me in her father's palace. The story is familiar. Everybody knows it well. But do other enchanted people feel as nervous as I do? The stories do not tell. Ask if they will be happier when the changes come, as already they are fairly happy in a frog's doom. I've been a frog now for 100 years, and in all this time I've not shed many tears. I am happy. I like the life, can swim for many a mile when I have hopped to the river, and am forever agile. And the quietness. Yes, I like to be quiet. I'm habituated to a quiet life. But always when I think these thoughts as I sit in my well, another thought comes to me and says, it is part of the spell to be happy, to work up contentment, to make much of being a frog, to fear disenchantment, says, it will be heavenly to be set free, cries, heavenly the girl who disenchants, and the royal times heavenly, and I think it will be. Come then, royal girl and royal times, come quickly. I can be happy until you come, but I cannot be heavenly. Only disenchanted people can be heavenly. Now, let's get the word picture out of the way. This, of course, is a game that Stevie Smith is playing, making a 3A reference or allusion, A-L-L-U-S-I-O-N, an allusion, a reference to another story that you're somewhat maybe familiar with. What is the story about the frog being kissed by the prince or the princess, right? Are you familiar with this, correct? So that the frog is kissed and then will what? Put it in your notes because that's an important word you're going to write down. Once the frog is kissed, what happens to the frog? He changes or he turns or he morphs, right? Becomes something else. Now notice this poem will say, I'm a frog until I'm not. What is significant about being a frog in this poem? The frog does what? What about the frog? Notice what she says about the frog. I've been a frog for 100 years. And in all this time, I have not shed many tears. I'm happy. Why is the frog happy? What is it that the frog can do? Swim for many miles, living in his little well. The frog is happy, living in the confined universe of a frog's life. In other words, Miss Benitez, the frog knows the frog's life. It is, for your notes, predictable. It is obvious. The rhythms are easily forecastable. To be a frog means I do A, and I do B, and I do C. That's a frog's life, and I live the froggy's life, and I am happy. But now we'll continue. Quietness. A frog's life is a quiet life because it's a predictable life. Everything goes the way it's supposed to go, day after day after day. It's a quiet life. Yes, I like the quiet. She says, I'm habituated to a quiet life. Habituated here means what? It's all so comfortable, you see. It's like pulling a nice warm blanket and wrapping it around you. A froggy's life is a quiet life, a comfortable life, a predictable life. There is nothing to challenge the frog in a froggy's life, living at the bottom of the well. But always when I think these thoughts, some of you are starting to realize, oh, wait a minute, this ain't a poem about frogs at all. You might say it's a poem about being a high school senior. Right about the time you start to go, you know, this isn't so bad. A life where everything is predictable and boring. Where everything for me is always forecasted very easily. I know exactly what's coming. Every day looks kind of the same, feels kind of the same. There's a certain kind of quietness about the entire experience. And yet, always when I think these thoughts as I sit in my well, another thought comes to me and says, it's part of the spell. Notice she calls the habituated life a spell, as if you are under a spell, unable to break free. To be happy, to work up contentment, to make much of being a frog, to fear disenchantment. What does that mean? Miss Mueller, what does that mean, disenchantment? She says, the one thing I realize I fear is disenchantment. I fear change. The moment all of the froggy life in the well goes away. Says, it will be heavenly to be set free. After the frog is kissed, it's no longer a frog, that is to say, in the mythology, right? Says or cries, heavenly the girl who disenchants in the royal times. Heavenly, and I think it will be. Come then. Notice the last stanza. The poet decides, let's make a decision. Come then, royal girl in royal times. Come quickly. I can be happy until you come, but I cannot be heavenly. Only disenchanted people can be heavenly. At the end of this poem, Ms. Benitez, what is it that the poet decides as a frog must happen? Whether you like it or not, the frog must ultimately leave what? The well. Right? Got to leave the well. Wait a minute, I don't want to leave the well. I kind of like it here. Come to think of it, as one or two seniors have said over the years, it's a funny thing how I complained about the well for the last 4 years. Oh, this wretched life of being a high school student. Oh, if only I could finally get out. Now that I'm just a few days away, there's this realization, whoa, whoa, whoa. So the well is about to go away. Right. And the life that I call smooth, predictable, it's all about to go away. Right. What does it mean to say at the end of the poem, though, I accept it. Come, it's okay. It's all right. Because even though I'm happy, I can't be heavenly. What does that mean to you? Is there actually a way to look forward to the future here as a high school senior? To say about your life that even though it's about to get turned upside down, it's still something worth looking forward to. Wait a minute, 3A observation. Do you find this ironic? We're at the end of your hymnal. We began our semester in September with a poet named Blake who asked a really interesting question in Songs of Innocence, Songs of Experience. Is it better to remain in youth, naivete, ignorance, Or is it better to have experience and lose your naivete, lose your innocence? Which is better? Remember, we had those debates. Were you happier at 5, playing at the park, swinging all day? Some of you will report, juniors do not understand what I'm going through right now. A few days away from the end of my first semester. For Mr. Harder, the end of his high school career. Some of you will have the experience in April, early May, that Mr. Harder now feels. That is to say, of being just a few days away from emancipation. But the question becomes, now what? Emancipated means free. Free to do what? Go where? What about the world outside of the well? There is no world outside of the well for a frog. That's the whole point of leaving. And what about all the frogs that tried to leave the well and then came back? You watched them, didn't you, growing up? You are aware of those frogs who drive their pickup trucks up and back and up and back. Right? Right? And that student who I stood right outside that door, some picture was not hung there at that time. And I said to him, what will you do after you leave? And he said, I ain't coming back here, never. And I went, you sure about that? Dude, I am totally sure about that. He almost got mad at me like I'm somehow challenging him. And I remember a few years later, my girl takes me out to the movie, and after the show, I'm driving back home down Main Street, and we stop at the red light. And because I'm not in Houston, I look to the side in Houston. And our eyes lock up. And a whole universe passes between us in that split second. And I knew that he was standing with me again in that hall. And he was looking at me saying, I ain't never coming back. Whoops. Why is it so hard to leave the well? And some of us are ready to write later at 3B about how this little poem, wow, this little poem really does speak to a high school senior. Maybe some of us don't want to live the quiet life we've been cursing all our life. Let's take a look at Not Waving But Drowning. This is also a extremely popular and much anthologized poem. And I think as well speaks to the high school experience in fundamental ways. Let's take a look at it. I'm on page 1290. Not waving but drowning. Are you ready? Nobody heard him. Nobody heard him. Nobody heard him. The dead man. But still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving, but drowning. Poor chap, he always loved larking. Now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him. His heart gave way, they said. Oh, no, no, no. It was too cold always. Still the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life. And not waving, but drowning. Now, you're going to find few poems, as I say, as brilliant an offering as this poem in its simple complexity. The poem is so unbelievably simple, the way it lays there on the page, the innocent lines. And yet, there is a profound, profound message going on here. Think about the word picture. You just walked past students in this hall who you said to them, hey, how's it going? And they went, oh, it's going great. It's going awesome, dude. At least that's how you heard. At least that's how you heard what they said. They were doing this. You assumed they were saying, hey, yeah, it's all. You had no idea they were out in the middle of the ocean drowning, going, help me. And all of a sudden, this poem goes, bam. And you realize, whoa, 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 she's playing a very interesting word picture here. Human existence is all about understanding some people ain't waving, they're drowning. And how would you know the difference? And do you remember that poem about Icarus falling into the water and nobody seeming to care? I've made a 3A observation, haven't I? See how we do this? We start to connect a lot of these poems, don't we, right? Yeah, the idea is that here there's a disconnect often in the postmodern experience of alienated self, where we make assumptions about people. Remember Prufrock, T.S. Eliot's Prufrock will say, each morning I prepare a face to meet the faces that I meet. That is to say, we've always got to make sure we're able to fool everyone into believing, dude, everything is so great for me. Is it possible that one or two of us finally in our senior year began to look differently at others when we began to realize maybe their life isn't as great as they put on for it to be? And maybe we ourselves have spent way too much time pretending like everything was fine, knowing full well, yeah, not so much. Instead of seeking help, maybe pretending as if it's all okay. The question of this poem, finally, is how do you wish to look at other people? How do you interpret their words and actions? There are one or two students at Worland High School who are not waving. They are drowning. And we never understood it. We never saw it. Why is that? Are we incapable of seeing another's pain? Or is it that we ourselves are drowning and not waving, and so a drowning man, it's hard to save somebody else? You see what I'm saying? This poem, I don't know, you get to decide whether this poem offers any kind of hope or not. Or maybe it just helps you the next time you see someone gesturing to decide which it is, waving or drowning. Well, there you go, an introduction to Stevie Smith, and we did it in just a few minutes. I'm sorry, I wish we had more time. Thank you.